All right, now we welcome in Carter Karels to the Minor Lounge. Carter graduated with a journalism degree from Texas A&M in 2018. He's worked at USA Today, San Antonio Express, and Dallas Morning News, and now is at the South Bend Tribune up in there in Indiana. Carter, welcome on. How you doing?
Doing great, man. Can't complain. Life's great. How about you?
I'm doing well. Glad that football is back, especially college football. And as you got to kind of experience, there's still some craziness in the college football world on the field in terms of upsets and everything like that. Real quick, how has everything been for you in covering the Irish kind of up to this point throughout the whole season? Through I guess pre-Saturday, if you will.
It's been good. I mean, I've kind of said this all season that it feels like we're playing with house money here. The fact that the season's happening, the fact that we're able to cover games, interview players. A few months ago, we didn't know if we'd be able to do any of that. And so getting to do a whole season so far has been awesome. Been able to write some cool stories. There's been plenty of storylines to cover so far. And a program like Notre Dame, there's a lot going on. We saw last Saturday, one heck of a game. So
Okay.
definitely an exciting season, and it's been a blast covering it.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, a lot going on. A few months ago, we didn't know if we were going to play football. We didn't know if Notre Dame was going to be home to a conference. Now you're in the ACC. What is a historically independent school? What has that kind of been like? You covered the Irish a few years prior to this year. Their proud independent fan base love kind of playing everybody across the nation. A lot of different rivalries. What was that shift like, if there was one? What did you feel during that time?
It was extremely strange. It still takes a little bit getting used to seeing this player getting ACC Player of the Week, this player, being ACC on the jerseys and on the field. It's a very strange thing for Notre Dame, being this historically independent program. And I think the recurring joke among fans, since they know this is just a one-year deal, is like, how funny would it be after all the years of the griping from other fans saying, oh, they need to join a conference because they have a weak schedule. How funny would it be for them to go in 1 year and win the ACC?
Sure.
We'll see if that happens, but I think they've done obviously very well this season, and it seems like it's been really great mutually. They've been able to share their NBC revenue with the ACC. They agreed to do that. And then ACC afforded them a schedule and really a whole slate to play. Had they not been in the ACC, they'd be kind of like BYU this year, just scheduling a lot of random programs and maybe not have the strength of schedule that they need to make the playoffs. So very mutually beneficial. I know a lot of people have opinions about it. I totally understand why there's all these different opinions about it. But I think when you look at, has it been beneficial for both sides? It has been.
Yeah. They kind of a clear path, if you will, at least on paper, to get to a college football playoff, since they could compete in an actual conference title game instead of just kind of playing an independent schedule. So spot on there. Was kind of curious your take leading up to the game and the game day experience for you for this past Saturday, because of course, how funny would it be if they do win the ACC? In order to do that, they'd have to beat Clemson. Obviously, just knocked off the Tigers in double overtime last Saturday without Trevor Lawrence. We'll get into that, but a lot of weird things going on, not just in college football, but the country, COVID, the presidential election, and NBC had a lot of things going on the network on Saturday night. I'm just kind of curious what that game day experience was like for you and maybe other people that you talked to.
It was bananas. I mean, at one point they had to put the game on USA Network because President-elect Joe Biden was giving his kind of acceptance speech. And then later they thought, well, if it goes to overtime, or if it goes to enough overtimes past midnight Eastern, they were going to have to move it to USA Network again because SNL, Saturday Night Live, starts at midnight Eastern. So it was like all of this madness. And then not to mention the game was crazy. the fact that Trevor Lawrence a couple weeks ago tested positive for the coronavirus,
Mm-hmm.
and then DJ Uiagalelei is playing quarterback for them. Just a lot of nuts scenarios that all converged. He had the storming on the field incident that happened after the game that generated a lot of discussion as well. So it was just like an endless string of like, well, that's crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy. It was just an endless stream of those kind of things. And it made it fun, also made it a little bit horrifying, but overall just lived up to the expectation, because this was a game that I think Notre Dame media, Clemson media, Notre Dame fans, Clemson fans, they all had it scheduled on they all had it circled on the calendar.
Right, sure, of course.
Since last December. Since the bowl game last year, this is all people have been talking about. And so you had all that hype, and it didn't only live up to the hype, it exceeded the hype. So it's cool to see.
It was really that first like pure college football chaotic game I think that we've had this season. I think it's maybe safe to say that there have been some great games and some wacky finishes and whatnot this year, but that was just and then everything else with the SNL and the president elect coming on, Joe Biden, to give his speech with Kamala Harris. I mean, just all, like you said, bananas. I think that's a good word for it. You got into a lot of stuff there. So let me, first of all, you were not at the game, correct? You were covering it from afar?
Yeah. So I'm going to cover like 3 games this year. We have 4 reporters at our newspaper, and every outlet only gets 1 per outlet for the home games. So, it is what it is. Again, it's kind of like we're playing with house money, but
Sure.
Yeah, so that wasn't a game that I covered. Our Eric Hansen covered that game, but I certainly covered it from home, wrote stories about it, and watched it all. So, yeah.
Got it. You were just doing it at your place, maybe a little bit quieter than it was at the stadium. So let's jump right in. There were a few things there that caught my attention. I was curious, did you get an explanation on of course, Trevor Lawrence wasn't playing, but I found it odd that he was on the sideline, even though I'm sure his quarantine requirement may have expired. He may have completed that, but it still kind of seemed weird with him on the sideline and wearing a mask and traveling, due to all these, COVID concerns. Did you guys get an explanation on that from any ISDs or anything?
Yeah, the thing is with the protocols, the COVID situation, it varies school to school, conference to conference. There's a lot of complexities that go into it. And with Trevor Lawrence, by that time, he was not currently carrying the coronavirus. It wasn't like he had it in his system and was contagious. But at that time, so he was able to travel. But also, you got to remember the guy hasn't practiced for 2 weeks. The guy hasn't really conditioned or worked out that much for 2 weeks. Wasn't really part of meetings as much. It's not like he could be at the practices themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to think, man, it's hard. And then they also have, after you've kind of cleared the COVID protocols, there's a certain amount of time where they've got to give you other tests like of your heart and other evaluations. And it takes kind of a few days to really get clear of all that after you've tested negative. So, while it's kind of like a weird situation, it only happened because it was so complex, and he only was cleared either that Friday or that Saturday to be, to go to the game. It did save us a headache, the fact that, the head coach, Davos Sweeney, kind of ruled him out the previous Saturday, because we were definitely wondering, like, okay, is he just going to like fly on a private jet when he gets cleared Saturday and then play that day? Like, is he going to drive to Notre Dame? Like, what does that even look like? But the more we looked into it, the more we understood, okay, it's not just you get cleared and then you play. There's kind of this period where you have to kind of get eased back into it.
Yeah, of course. And I think it just, at least to me, it was just kind of surprising to even see him on the sideline that he did travel. But I guess to your point, he did clear, all the he wasn't carrying the disease, he wasn't carrying the virus. He cleared all those protocols, but not all the protocols to play. It just kind of felt almost a little out of place that he was even there on the sideline. I would have thought he would still be remote or something.
Yeah.
That's kind of the wacky season we're playing in. And you mentioned obviously his backup already. DJ Uyangolele. Butcher
Good
that.
try. It's a hard name to pronounce.
It's a hard name. It's like compared to like taking a test in high school or something, and a really hard test. And the first part's really easy, DJ, and then you hit the second part of the test, and if you didn't study for it, it's gonna get you.
That's why Ian Book is easy for me. I don't have to worry about that. So
right. Ian Book, very very easy. But what did you DJ had a great performance. What impressed you? What stood out about him, if anything?
Oh man, a few things. We knew how great his arm was. Like we knew that this is a kid in high school who's throwing at 85 yards like it was nothing. But really, the thing was, considering the moment and considering his inexperience, so composed, so cool, so collected. We also learned from Dabo Sweeney, and we don't really know the extent of it, but he said he wasn't 100%. He's kind of injured a little bit, kind of ruined his mobility. That's why you only see him run the ball 6 times. I think traditionally he'd look a little bit more like Cam Newton, where he's running 10, 15 times. That didn't happen, but he was still able to make plays with his arm. One thing I think he was able to take advantage of was Notre Dame's wide side of the field, where they're the field corners at. They kind of took advantage of a weakness there, and certainly their wide receivers came to play. But to see a guy make these wide throws all the way to the other side of the field, to the opposite hash, these deep outs, these deep corner routes, that was crazy to me, because those are NFL level throws.
Yeah.
Throws that the big time guys make, and he was making them all day, and certainly had a lot of big plays downfield. You start a true freshman and you expect dink and dunk and a little nerves, but you just didn't see that out of him.
Yeah, game management, short passes, ease him into the flow of the game, sure. And he had 439 yards, 2 TDs, and probably most impressively, he didn't turn the ball over for Clemson. So that was a reason why they obviously played really well. What struck you about Notre Dame? So obviously DJ's coming in. That's not Trevor Lawrence. They looked at the same caliber, and Clemson's so great everywhere else. That's why I think a lot of analysts and experts were thinking Clemson would win and giving them the edge going into that game. What did Notre Dame do, especially on defense, to kind of gain the momentum and upper hand? Because while DJ was throwing the ball all over the field, they limited the Tigers to like sub 40 yards rushing.
Yeah, it was very clear for Notre Dame's defense that their number one objective was, if anyone's going to beat us, it's not going to be Travis Etienne. And Travis Etienne has been incredibly dynamic his whole career, especially this year. He's really stepped it up as a receiving option too. So you really have to account for him in a lot of different ways. To hold him to 28 rushing yards, that just doesn't happen anywhere else in Travis Etienne's career. So, yeah, they gave up 439 yards, but to hold Etienne to that number and the big plays that they were able to generate in the big moments. You had Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the rover linebacker at Notre Dame, who forced a fumble, and then he forced another fumble that he returned for a touchdown. You had the 2 sacks in the double overtime period. You certainly had the stop at the end of regulation that helped Notre Dame come back. I think Notre Dame's defense, they had some weaknesses. Mentioned, the field cornerback position, certain parts of their secondary. But for the most part, they came to play to stop the run. They made big plays when it mattered, and they got a stop when it mattered.
Yeah, 3 fumbles for Clemson. Ball security obviously going to probably be a point of emphasis, I would imagine, for Dabo moving forward. But To your point, was that just Notre Dame making plays, a little bit of, shooting themselves in the foot, putting the ball on the ground? What did you see in those, in those plays?
Well, the first two, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, I think made some really good plays. On the first one, the one that he made on the pitch to ETN, that looked like a trick play. If you go back and watch that play, one of their wide receivers is doing a free release, and he's running 50 yards down the field. And it was a play they had used earlier in the season that had worked. And, we didn't get to see if Etienne was going to tuck back and throw it. But it certainly looked like with how much separation that wide receiver made, it could have been a touchdown. But instead, what had happened was Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah came off the edge. He was blitzing on that play, a well-timed blitz. And they used an offensive guard to try to pull around and get to him. But because he didn't hesitate, because he didn't, look and see, wait, that receiver is going 50 yards down the field, he blew it up. I mean, if you watch it, he goes full speed and collides with him right as the pitch was happening. And that play is only made if you have aggressiveness and no hesitation. So that was all him on that play. The second play, he stripped it out of the guy's hands. The third fumble was the last play of the game where they were just pitching it around. So I don't know if it was much what Notre Dame's defense did, but that was a game where Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, he entered the season. People thought, we think this is a first round draft pick. He's kind of a tweener. We don't know if he plays inside linebacker or safety or hybrid position. Ever since this season has started, he has just continued to build his stock in the NFL draft. And I think where he is now, I'm expecting him to be a top 15 pick. And I think he very well could be the first or second linebacker taken in the NFL draft. And that was a game, I think, that made him a lot of money.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the Notre Dame defense definitely, to me, kept the Irish in the game and gave them the ability to ultimately win in the end. And that's because I think the Irish offense sputtered a little bit. They had the touchdown on play one, and then I don't think they scored another touchdown on offense until that last game-tying drive in regulation. So they kind of bookended the game with touchdowns on offense, but then they had the scoop and score, and then a litany of field goals. So, if Notre Dame wants to get to the playoff, I think they're in a good shape. If they, maybe win out and lose to Clemson, they see championship game. But if they want to leave no doubt and kind of run the table and beat Clemson again, maybe with Trevor Lawrence, who knows? What do the Irish need to do better offensively?
Yeah, offensively, I think it's just a matter of being more consistent and being more efficient in the red zone. I thought Notre Dame's offense, considering the defense they were playing, just considering the moment, they did a really good job moving it down the field. They had a lot more plays in the vertical passing game than they were accustomed to. I thought, it couldn't have gotten too much better outside of their struggles in the red zone. And I think in a way it's kind of the silver lining, because I think a lot of Clemson fans will say, well, didn't have Trevor Lawrence, was without multiple starters on defense. Next time this game is played, Notre Dame ain't winning. But on Notre Dame's side, you can say, well, you had you had first and goal, or you had third and goal at the 1, and then you had that opportunity wiped out with a false start penalty. You had another touchdown that was dropped by Michael Mayer, the tight end, and that ended up being a field goal. And then you had Ian Book fumble it at the goal line and lose possession. So you count that up, 4-4-7. I'm not a mathematician, but that's 15 points that their offense clearly missed out on. And, I don't know if you want to count the missed field goal at the end of halftime, but certainly there were missed opportunities for the offense. And red zone has been an issue for them this season. They've been really good at moving the ball, controlling time of possession, controlling and dictating the game flow with how they can run behind that elite offensive line. but once they get in the red zone, that's where things kind of sputter for them. So I think if this offense wants to take that next jump to that next level, they're going to have to be more efficient and, score a lot more touchdowns and field goals.
Yeah, and the last drive kind of proved it. I mean, Ian Book took them down, eight plays, 91 yards in minute 26 after the defense got that 3-and-out, as you mentioned just a few minutes ago. But so it looks like the pieces are there. So you guys, fans have to be excited for Notre Dame continuing forward, I would think.
Absolutely. And, for all the talk about the injuries that Clemson has, Notre Dame's had some injuries too. Their best receiver, Kevin Austin Jr., he's out for the year after breaking his foot, it appears. Braden Lindsey, probably their fastest receiver that they have, he is injured as well with a hamstring injury. Looking to come back here within the next couple of weeks, it appears. But so this is an offense that, obviously they've had troubles during the season. I think that was the best they've ever looked. But they're still missing pieces that they're looking to bring back. So I think having Braden Lindsey back the next time they play Clemson will be pretty big for them as well.
Yeah, and the next 4 games, it's Boston College, UNC, Syracuse, and Wake Forest. I think some of those teams are sneaky good. Syracuse is at the bottom of the ACC, but would you expect Notre Dame, if they can keep playing as they have been, they should kind of tear through that schedule and meet up with Clemson again, wouldn't you think?
Syracuse and Wake Forest, I'm expecting those to be blowouts. Those games should not be close for this team. Those should be take care of business games.
Sure.
I think Boston College is going to be competitive. I think, I would not be shocked if that was a one-possession game. Notre Dame, we've seen them struggle at times this year. The Duke game, it was a one-possession game most of the game. Louisville, they won 12-7. Other games, they've been really dominant. So I think Boston College, they've got enough talent. They've got a pretty good offense led by a former Notre Dame quarterback in Phil Jurkovec. So a lot of storylines there. Another one, and Notre Dame fans are going to hate me for mentioning this, but the last time they beat the number 1 team in the nation came in 1993 against Florida State at home. They called it the game of the century, and they won the game. They are number 1 in the nation. They have one more game left on the schedule. And who's left on the schedule? It's Boston College. Boston College ends up winning that game, last-second field goal, keeps Notre Dame from a national championship.
Yeah.
And it's kind of gone down in Boston College lore as like, David Gordon, the guy. It was the first win that Boston College ever had over Notre Dame in the Holy War. So, it'll be interesting to see. Everyone's kind of talking about that this week, the Phil Jurkovec storyline. I think Boston College is a well-coached team. They've got enough weapons, so I think they can make it competitive. North Carolina, tons of firepower on offense, really bad defense. So
Jekyll and Hyde for them, for the Tar Heels.
Yeah. So, Notre Dame's been pretty good defensively for the most part of this season. So I think they should be able to handle North Carolina, but you never know if they're just lighting it up. Maybe it's a shootout. So we'll see.
Yeah, sure. And Boston College obviously played Clemson real close and almost pulled that upset, the week prior. So it should be interesting. I mean, it seems destined that Notre Dame and Clemson would meet again in the ACC title game and perhaps, maybe a playoff, depending on what happens. I think there are a lot of good cases
Part 3
at this point, but I definitely think, Notre Dame and Clemson probably have inside tracks there at the top of the selection committee's papers. One final thing I wanted to speak with you on, and one thing that just stuck out to me, of course, at the end of the game was the field storm with all the students and fans rushing the field. And it truly felt for a second that, there was just this immense amount of joy, obviously, in the stadium. Just that watching that, you could feel the joy. I could, at least from the television screen, and then kind of reminded myself, like, wait a second, COVID, like still having a field storm, super spreading, like all these different things kind of ran across my mind. I couldn't I couldn't believe it. For a second, everything felt joyful and normal. And then I had to take a step back and kind of remember, oh, wait a second, what's the aftermath going to be of this? So, yeah, I guess first, were you kind of surprised? Were you expecting that based on what you've been hearing going up to that, on how, the university was planning on handling crowds and attendance, and then what was your reaction?
Yeah, what was crazy about it is Notre Dame was, thought they were pretty prepared for it. Their athletic director told, Eric Hansen, my fellow reporter at the South Bend Tribune, that they'd kind of planned for the scenario. Okay, probably not going to be a field storm if Clemson wins or if it's a big blowout win for Notre Dame, but probably a field storm if it's a close, crazy game. And so they had way more security than normal. They had way more people that could kind of guide folks like Brian Kelly and Ian Book off the field. It was also Brian Kelly had told his players before the game, hey, we're going to win this and they're going to storm the field. Just get ready and get out of there. He called it. And it was funny. Jeremiah Wusu-Kormoa said, we might as well call him Prophet Kelly now because he literally predicted what happened. So I think the key guys, the Brian Kellys of the world, the Ian Books, I think they got out of there pretty quick. Obviously, if you looked at the pictures, there were a lot of players in that scrum. A lot of the fans were wearing masks, and a lot of them had to test negative just to be at the game that week. So, something that we'll monitor, and it will be a weekly thing all week, is, how many positive tests will there be? So far, what we know from tests that they have administered from Tuesday of last week to Sunday, 2 people have tested positive, 2 were linked to contract tracing, and all 4 of those players did not attend Saturday's game. So as of Sunday's testing, no player has tested positive. We know there's an incubation period, so maybe someone may have contracted it and is not testing positive yet. There's a lot of answers we'll find out later this week. Certainly not something that you're crazy about. I think in the moment you kind of get it. It's like, okay, yeah, they beat the number 1 team in the nation. It's one of those things where, oh, my friend's storming the field, so I'm going to storm the field, and all that kind of stuff. But certainly I totally understand why people are concerned and why it's like, oh man, we got to be careful because something may happen out of this. But I think fortunately, from what we've gathered so far, there hasn't been anything too crazy that's come out of it. Certainly, we'll find out here in the coming days if anything too crazy comes out. But so far, so good.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people didn't like the optics of that, but it's kind of once a couple of people go and the dam breaks and you're not going to keep them off the field tonight type of deal. And it was interesting because I did read that article by your colleague there, and they were really focused. The athletic director said they were really focused on getting even Clemson off the field with a field storm. So maybe that's what maybe is lost in this. They said, hey, let's make sure we do that, and that's our number 1 objective, Clemson, and keep them safe, and then obviously our team, keep them safe, and kind of knowing in the back of their mind if something happens, they're not going to be able to stop it in its entirety. So that's another thing that I thought was interesting as well.
And how do you stop it if thousands of fans are swarming at once and you got 1 cop per 400 bodies? It's there's not much you can really do. I'm not sure what all they could have done other than just run out immediately, but it's also a heat of the moment situation where you don't really know. You just don't want to – it's more an individual thing. You don't want to be careless. You're a player. You want to put your mask on. You want to try to get out of there. You don't want to do anything too crazy. And from what we've seen so far, I mean, it seems like it was it was a weird thing for optics. It certainly was not a good look for from the media's perspective, how they were going to see it. But I think fortunately everything's going to turn out okay from what we've seen so far.
Yeah, hopefully so. And I know that there was a statement saying that the students had to take tests before leaving campus. I think that were at that game, and just to make sure that they were, even further monitoring it. So hopefully nothing transpires out of that. But it was just the whole day, starting at in the morning with just the whole presidential election, and then just spilling over into the college football day and the night. And then, as you mentioned, SNL had to be kind of pushed as well. So just kind of this crazy, just this weird day, absolutely nuts. And thank you for stopping by and chatting with me here in the Minor Lounge. Before I let you go, what does Clemson have to do to maybe win it all here?
Yeah, I mean, Trevor Lawrence being out a couple weeks, I think it's a matter of just, is he rusty? Is he good to go? I know he had some symptoms, so is this something that he can just kind of work through and get back into the thick of things? Their injuries on defense, are those guys going to be coming back? Certainly there's some concern, and they got beat up in that game against Notre Dame, had even more injuries than they had coming into it.
Yeah.
I think they take care of business the rest of the schedule. Notre Dame, December 19th, obviously going to be a huge game for them. I would personally think that Clemson will be able to win that game. But I think what's interesting is, and it was something that we all kind of thought about this year, could they play 3 times in one season? If that happens, I don't think you've seen anything like that in college football before.
So,
When has another team played anyone 3 times in one season? It just doesn't happen. And when you consider the history there, when you consider what happened in game 1 and all the drama that's going to be, with all of this
unfolding,
it's going to be very entertaining, and I can't wait for it because it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Carter Karels of the South Bend Tribune, thanks for stopping by the Minor Lounge. Where can everybody find you and your work?
Yes, sir. IndyInsider.com or the SouthBendTribune.com would be great. Or you can go to my Twitter page at Carter Karels and find me there.
Awesome. Carter, thank you so much. Good luck the rest of the way, and stay safe.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem.